1 2 1 2. One two one two. 1 2 1 2. 1 2 1 2. Okay, it sounds like I'm coming in live now. Walillah alhamd. Especially as it relates to the microphone. Inshallah, tonight, first and foremost, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal-mursaleen, Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een, amma ba'd, ikhwatul Islami ibadallah. Tonight, I'll be discussing, by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's permission, an initiative that Talha Islamic Ministry will undertake by Allah's permission. And this is because it's in need, and that is the establishment of some type of Muslim family adjudication platform or center. I don't want to say institute, but some type of structured entity that deals with family adjudication for the Muslims. And this is as it relates to marriage and divorce, likewise child support and child custody. Now, this is something that's needed within the community, and there are a lot of things that are needed within the community, but this is something that is definitely needed. And so the idea behind it would be to alleviate some of the problems that we see occurring that's directly connected to some of these issues. Now, of course, a project of this nature would definitely take resources to pull off. It would definitely take resources to pull off by Allah's permission. But if people see the gold and the value in something of this nature, then I don't believe that it'll be difficult and or impossible for it to be pulled off. And so this brings us to the title of this particular sitting, Child Support and Custody Court. Child Support and Custody Court, Judgment of Jahiliyyah. Judgment of Jahiliyyah. And so before I go into the topic of discussion, and I'm pretty sure some of the brothers or those who are watching can pretty much guess where I'm going. But before I go into that, when looking at a Muslim family adjudication center, then this would definitely take, first and foremost, students of knowledge that are proficient as it relates to these affairs, the affairs of marriage, divorce, and things that surround them, the khula, and whatever else that directly is connected to this particular affair. Likewise, concerning child support and child custody. Now, when looking at this particular mas'ala, when talking and discussing a family adjudication center, then it's going to take several things. Like I said, you will need students of knowledge that are knowledgeable as it relates to these particular matters in order to be able to deal with situations that come. But then you would need, for instance, a notary public. You would need some type of paralegal or some type of legal document preparer, someone who is skilled in putting those things together. You may not necessarily need an attorney but it's good to have one that is known that this person would be going back to for legal matters. You would also need to have some type of person with an accounting background, specifically for financial budgeting, especially as it relates to determining what a person can give. Especially if you're dealing with a couple that's separating and there's children, what a person can give as it relates to spending on their children from what's legitimately in their means. What's legitimately in their means. These things would be needed. Why? Because a family adjudication center would be basically to deal with these matters instead of having to go to the courts, where we know that the judgment that's coming from the courts is not exactly in accordance with the Kitab and the Sunnah. And in a lot of cases, it opposes the Kitab and the Sunnah, as we will see shortly, inshallah. And so when dealing with marriage, divorce, and these other matters, these things will be needed. Say, for instance, if a person wants to get married, a couple wants to get married, they can easily go to one of these adjudication centers with the witnesses and the wali and whoever else. They can either get married there or be married somewhere else. The actual marriage ceremony really doesn't matter where it takes place. But when they come to the adjudication center, the witnesses and all those names have to be on whatever documents that's prepared. Likewise, whatever conditions for the marriage that were made should be written into the document. A mention of the dowry should also be written into the document. And this is for several reasons, things that may come up in the future, like a separation by way of khul'a. Then having that in the document would be vital. But then within the document, the Islamic legislation as it relates to how the divorce or separation takes place if a marriage was to come to that. And this is where you need a paralegal or legal document preparer, because now this person would basically put together an affidavit that would be suitable to present in courts just in case something happens and for whatever reason a person has to go to the courts here. Then the couple will be doing nothing more than going to court in order to have a contract that's built and based upon the Kitab and the Sunnah enforced, not to get a judgment from them, but to have the Kitab and the Sunnah enforced based off a document that was made prior to marriage. And of course, that's why you'll need a notary public to be there to witness it, to make it like an official court document, and thus forth, and so on. And thus forth and so on. And that would also occur when dealing with child support and child custody, especially considering the fact that the courts do not deal with these matters in the manner or in accordance with the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. Actually, they deal with these matters in a corrupt way, as we'll see shortly. Now, I think the best way to illustrate where I'm going tonight is just to deal with child support and child custody. And so, when dealing with child support, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When dealing with child support, for instance, there are fatwas that have been spread around. I remember some years back, if I'm not mistaken, it was a fatwa by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih Al Uthaymeen. Yeah, it is. It was a fatwa of Sheikh a fatwa of Sheikh Muhammad al-Wasabi. Sheikh Muhammad al-Wasabi, all right, where basically, because I tried to find a fatwa online, I couldn't find it. So now I have to go off of memory of what was mentioned in the fatwa. But from my recollection, from what I can recall, because this fatwa was circulating years ago, probably over 10 years ago, and Allah knows best. But basically, it stated that if a woman couldn't get her rights, or the child couldn't get their rights from the father, for whatever reason may be, then it was permissible for the woman to go to the courts here in the States in order to acquire the rights as it relates to feeding for the child. Now, me myself, I'm going to say this explicitly. People may feel a certain way about this, but I'll explain why I'm saying what I'm saying. But that fatwa is incorrect, and that fatwa should not be applied here in the States, period. Why? Not that the sheikh is wrong in what he said. Why? Because the sheikh was only responding to a question that was posed to him. And so that which he was given of information is what he responded to. And so there's a principle, yani al-hukm far'un an tasawwurihi, that the ruling on a thing, it branches forth from how that thing is perceived. So if a person comes to a scholar and he gives a circumstance or a scenario about a particular thing, then that's how that scholar is going to perceive that issue. And so he's going to judge in accordance with that, with what was brought to him. However, that doesn't mean that the reality of that issue is what was presented to the sheikh. And so although the sheikh answered the question with what was presented to him, because the true and full nature of that situation wasn't clarified to the sheikh, then that fatwa is really not applicable, especially to the people it's going to affect, because all of the information wasn't brought to the sheikh. And we have a narration that's collected by Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim fi Sahihain, where the Prophet ﷺ stated, "Innama ana basharun." Undoubtedly, I am only, yani, a human being. Wa innahu ya'tini al-khasam, and somebody who is, yani, an opponent in an argument may come to me. فَلَعَلَّ بَعْضُكُمْ أَنْ يَكُونَ أَبْلَغَ مِنْ بَعْضٍ. And perhaps some from amongst you all is more eloquent than others from amongst you, yani in argumentation. فَأَحْسَبُ أَنَّهُ صَدَقَ. So I assume that this individual is truthful. فَأَقْضِي لَهُ بِذَلِكَ. And so I judge in accordance with that. Yani, with the perception of the situation that was presented, the judgment is given in accordance to that. فَمَنْ قَضَيْتُ لَهُ بِحَقِّ مُسْلِمٍ. But if I give a judgment to an individual as it relates to the right of a Muslim, فَإِنَّمَا هِيَ قِطْعَةٌ مِّنَ النَّارِ. Then it is nothing more than a portion or a piece of the fire. فَلَيَأْخُذَهَا أَوْ فَلَيَتْرُكَهَا. And this individual, he either, yani, he takes it or he rejects it. Yani that portion of fire, he takes it or rejects it. So this is what is intended by al-hukm far'un an tasawwurihi, that the ruling branches forth from how that thing is perceived. The ruling on a thing, yani, it branches forth from how that thing is perceived. So if the sheikh is bought, whatever, regardless of whatever the issue and situation may be, if a sheikh has bought some information about an issue or about a topic, and he is not given all of the information concerning that issue and that topic, then this is what this hadith would apply. And so it's not necessarily something that's incorrect on the sheikh's part. On the contrary, it's the person that's bringing this lopsided scenario to the sheikh. And I believe that because I saw other fatwas while I was online trying to find the original fatwa. I found other fatwas that were from other people, unknown people I never heard of, that were basically saying the same thing. And I assume that these were Westerners, trying to masquerade as mashaykh amongst the Hanafi communities or the whoever else. But, it really doesn't matter who they were, really, in reality. The point is that for people that live here in America and have been experiencing the American dream, for lack of better expressions, then we know the reality of the child support and child custody courts. And so for this reason, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm going to speak in a general sense now, and I want the brothers and sisters that may be listening to understand one thing. When I say sisters go into the child support court system, and thus for so on, of course, we know I'm not speaking about all of the sisters. That's understood. A lot of sisters are trying to strive upon guidance, and they know that place isn't preferred to deal with things in that manner. Is not preferred at all. So we understand that. I am talking about the wicked from amongst the sisterhood that will claim that they had to go there, and in reality they didn't have to go there, but they're being vicious and vindictive with their ex-husbands. Those are the women that I'm talking about, that I'm going to be speaking about. So any sister that is listening to this, if you don't fall into that category, don't take what I'm saying personally. Because a lot of times when these discussions come up, it seems like sisters internalize what's being said. Look, if you're not a 9-time married sister, a 7-time married sister, if I'm talking about that, then it doesn't apply to you. If we were talking about that subject. So if you're not a sister who has went to the child support court out of vindictiveness and trying to bring about harm to your ex-husband, I'm not talking about you. You're not the type of sister that's being discussed here. But it will be beneficial for the sister who has gone to the child support court, not with that intent, but just being ignorant as it relates to the realities of the child support and child custody system here in the U.S. And so this will be beneficial for this type of sister in that regard. Now, when dealing with child support, and I feel like I skipped over something, right? So, at any rate, before going into this discussion, I want to say Sheikh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, there was a fatwa of his that was used to float around some years ago too, where he basically stated that it was permissible to go to the courts if the courts would give a judgment that was ala wufq al-kitabi wa sunnah, that was exactly aligned with and in accordance with the kitab and the sunnah. But if that wasn't the case, then no. And so sometimes there are legitimate times that a person may have to go to the courts because there is a legitimate right being withheld. And so the person, and I'm not speaking about child custody or child support right now. It may be for some other reason, so I just want to state that and make that clear. But when dealing with child support specifically, I'm going to deal with child support and child custody separately for a second. When dealing with child support specifically, there is in no way, shape, form, or fashion where that's happening, period. And before I begin this, a lot of times, because you have sisters run around, the wicked ones, the wicked sisters, the ones that I made the disclaimer about earlier, run around with all these sob stories. They could get no help from anybody. And in reality, they didn't try and get help. They were trying to run around and shame a person, shame their ex-husband in front of whoever would listen to them. They weren't really going around trying to get help in anything. That's one. But then two, a lot of times, because I find that this case is happening quite often, brothers withhold giving money because their rights are not being given to them as it relates to the child. Visitation or whatever the case may be. A sister gets remarried and doesn't give and a man wants custody and he doesn't give her custody. Or the child reaches the age of 7 and the husband wants custody and the sister will not allow the child to choose who he or she wants to live with. And other than that. So rights are being withheld. And so a lot of times a brother may feel like, look, I'm being reduced to nothing more than just sending money. I'm being reduced to nothing more than just sending money. So at some point he cuts off sending child support because of dhulm that's happening on the end of the woman. And so now, instead of the woman coming to the table and trying to rectify the situation, which would necessitate her acting right, she does that, like a tit for tat type thing. Okay, I'm gonna go over here. Or first try and shame the person, then go there and make it seem to the people she had no other choice, which is incorrect. But the child support courts, one of the things that people have to understand is child support is big business for the states. It's big business. Child support, I'm going to go through a couple of states for 1 second. The lowest state in 2018, the lowest state recorded for bringing in money for child support was Vermont. This is in 2018. Vermont bought in $41.6 million off of child support. And that was the lowest. The highest state that brought in the biggest revenue for child support was California in that same year. They bought in $2.3 billion in child support. New Jersey bought in $1 billion. New York, $1.7 billion. Pennsylvania, $1.1 billion. So the total collection of child support in the U.S. for the year 2018, this is the earliest I could find it. I would rather have gotten 2021 statistics, but I could only find 2018. But in 2018, the total revenue that was brought in from all states was $28.5 billion. Now, when you understand that it's that type of money that's being shuffled around, you'll understand why the states do not want to stop the child support system. Because there's a lot of money involved in it. And this information was with the National Conference of State Legislatures. Now, the reality is, who's getting paid off child support? Because the courts will make it seem as if this is for the best interest of the child. This is for the child. This is child support. And if a man isn't paying his child support, he's a deadbeat dad, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. All that sugar-coated foolishness that they run around and saying that really masks the reality of what they're truly doing. And so when looking at this particular issue, When looking at this particular issue, I want to take a look at, let me see here, a New York Times article titled Child Support versus Deadbeat States. And that title is appropriate. Child support versus deadbeat states. Now I'm going to do a little reading because I know I could easily say what this is about myself, but sometimes people need to hear professionals or whatever you want to call them speaking about this particular matter. So the article starts off, in most states in America, child support does not actually go to children. We'll say it again. Child support does not actually go to children. And this is why a woman going to the child support courts on a husband, especially being ex-husband, especially being vindictive, is committing dhulm against that person. Because one, the money that they take from that man, it doesn't actually go to the children. It doesn't actually go to the children. And we're going to take a look at, in a few minutes, the end result. So the hardships that fathers have gone through as it relates to this child support system. So it states, particularly when they are being raised in low-income families. Low-income families, what type of demographic of people do you think that is? What type of demographic of people do you think that is when they say low-income families? That's usually people in inner city and or urban areas. Yani blacks and Latinos. All right. And that is the demographic of people that Talha Islamic Ministry is trying to help, the most underserved masajid in America. The most underserved masajid in America. All right. Anyway, continuing. So the article states, confused? You're not alone. Well, no one should be confused about this. This is something that's been well known, especially brothers like that's coming out of Los Angeles. We know that this child support court system is fraudulent. But anyway, confused? You're not alone. You're confused to hear that your money, the money that is said to be going to your child, is not really going to them? Are you confused about that? Well, you're not alone. Many people have no clue how the child support and public assistance system operates. And I would even say to the sisters that think that they have to go to these places that are not being vindictive, a lot of them don't really know how this works neither. This is why we're taking the time to go through this. And it's hope that people, the solution that the organization is trying to come with will be supported. Because we need to have a solution. The Yahud, you don't find them, at least the religious ones, being put up in this court system. Everything that they have, every need of theirs is held right within their communities. And when I say community, I mean it in a true sense of the word community, not a neighborhood, but a community. They have a community. All their needs are found within their square mileage, however square miles that they have control of. They don't go outside of that, of their area. If I'm not mistaken, it was a statistic, I believe their money flips over 11 times before it leaves their community. That means they're spending with each other over and over again. This is something that the Muslims that are here in the States that we should be trying to emulate. That we should be trying to establish our own communities in a real way, all right? And that would also include, handling issues of this nature. So at any rate, because I believe this is going to take a while and I don't want to get sidetracked. The first thing to know, if you're a custodial parent, a majority of whom are mothers, and apply for public assistance, most commonly temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF, you are required by federal law to file a child support order. And there is no choice for either parent, says blah, 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 blah. I can't pronounce his name. Looks like an Indian name. Vice President for Programs and Strategy at the Insight Center for Community Economic Development. So anyway, I'm going to go down a little bit on this article to get to the crux, to get to the meat and potatoes. All right. In fact, despite the deadbeat dad stereotype often pinned on whole categories of non-white men by racist politicians, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that Black fathers actually spend more time feeding, dressing, playing with, and reading to their children. Those are Black fathers who mothers allow to be fathers. And when I say that, I mean, don't be a means of obstructing them from their children and coming up with excuses, to obstruct them from their children from one angle or another. And unfortunately, even those that claim to be upon guidance act like people that have no guidance, whether they live under the same roof or apart than fathers of other races. Blah, blah, blah. Now, this is the part we want to go to about, because the question was stated, or the term was stated that the child support does not go directly to the child. So who does it go to? They go directly to the state, which, depending on its policies, either keeps it all or passes through a percentage of it. Now, remember, I stated some states and what they brought in of revenue. This is why I'm referring to it as revenue or profit in the year 2018. The lowest being Vermont, 41 million. The highest being California, 2 billion. This is profit. So again, they're saying when excuse me, I lost my spot. But anyway, the article is basically saying that it goes directly to the state. And depending on that state's policies, because each state is different, depending on that state's policies, either keeps all of that money or passes through a percentage of that money to the mother who is supposed to spend that money on the child. Right? That's who keeps the money, the state. This is from an article in the New York Times, child support versus deadbeat states, right? Child support versus deadbeat states. So I took the liberty of looking up which states actually pass the money through to the child. And so Alabama doesn't at all. So when a woman in Alabama takes the father of her children to court for child support, if he is struck with an order where he has to pay $200, $300, $400, $500 a month on child support, none of that goes to the child. None of it. They just continue to give her the public assistance that she's been getting. And they keep all that and divide that with the federal government. When looking at the state of California, only $50 passes through. Only $50. The state of New Jersey, only $100 passes through. The state of New York, in 2018, the state of New York profited from child support by 1.7 billion. Only $100 passes through to the child, and if a woman has two children from the same man, then $200 passes through to the child. Yes, $200. So now she gets an extra $200 with the public assistance she had already been giving. In the state of Pennsylvania, where there's a large population of Muslims in the Philadelphia area, and I know brothers are going through this problem there. They made in 2018 $1.1 billion. Only $100 passes through to the child for a woman that has one child with a man. And if she has two or more, only $200 passes through. Only $200 passes through. And there's a link on that same article that takes you to this breakdown. So now then, how is this in the best interest of the child? In reality, how is this in the best interest of the child? How is this? They're claiming. Now we know. I looked at averages. Each state on average, how much fathers are being hit up on child support. Now the state of Pennsylvania was like $800. That now means that if a woman is getting public assistance and she has one child from a man, the only thing that's passing through is $100. But yet they're taking $800 from this person. And not only on top of that, but when they make a judgment against the person, they actually go what they call retroactive. Now, I'm not sure what their retroactivity may be, if it's 1 year, 2 years, or whatever the case may be. But in some cases and in some states, when they go retroactive, a person is automatically in debt to the state by almost $20,000. Now, he's indebted to the state when he never even made a contract with them. The woman went to the state to beg for money, and she made a contract with them. And then she sues for child support, and they hold that man accountable for the contract she initially made with them. This is considered to be dhulm in Islam. And on top of all that, the money that they're collecting goes back to them, and they send some to the federal government, and a very small portion goes to the child. Now, a person may say, well, the child has got to eat, Let's say, for instance, we have a scenario where a father is legitimately doing wrong and not handling his business, right? But I'm going to emphasize this. I've talked to more than one brother before on many occasions, and a lot of times women are acting vindictive, these wicked women. Again, disclaimer, go back to the disclaimer that I made in the beginning. These wicked women are acting vindictive with their ex-husbands by using their children as leverage against them. These are the wicked women, all right? And so child support is one of those situations. So I'm not talking about that type of scenario at the moment. I'm talking about a real scenario where a man isn't really handling his business, a Muslim man. And then you have a Muslimah that's dealing with whatever it is, she's dealing with the financial hardships. That we still have principles within Islam. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if you just know this portion of what I just said, forget about Islam for a second. Logically, does that make sense? But now if we bring it back into Islam, we have a principle, إِذَا تَزَاحَمَتِ الْمَفْسَدَتَانِ ارْتَقِبْ يعني أخفهما ضررا أو مفسدة. يعني if you have two corrupt things or two harms competing with one another, to implement that which is the least in being considered to be corruption or harm. Now, we start to look at the situation of what a mafsada is. This is when we have to understand what Islamic terminologies are to understand, not understand things from a Webster's dictionary perspective, but from an Islamic technical perspective. Although mafsada is sometimes translated as harm, is sometimes translated as corruption, and thus for so on. Don't look at it from a English Webster's dictionary understanding of harm or corruption. Look at it from an Islamic technical perspective of what these words mean. And so, like Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili in one of his books, he pointed out that a maslaha is whatsoever achieves or establishes the five preserved things, for lack of better translations, or is the means to establishing these five things. What are these five things? At the head of them is the deen. Thereafter is the life. Thereafter is the aql, or the intellect. Thereafter is the nasl, or the progeny. Thereafter is the mal, or one's wealth. Ad-daruriyat al-khams. Whatever establishes these things, or is a means to establish these things, then that is a maslaha. That is an advantage. That is a benefit. But whatever is a means to breach or do away, whatever breaches or does away with one of these five things, or is a means to breach, ruin, destroy, or do away with one of these five things, then it is a mafsada. It is a mafsada. So when we're looking at this particular situation, if you have two different mafsadas that are competing with one another, and there's no way that you can do away with both of them, you can only do away with one, then you have to choose what is the lesser of the two in harm. And so when we're looking at this particular circumstance, what is of greater harm here? The right of the child, as most sisters would probably state, or the oppression that's being brought upon that man as a result of women going to that system? Well, one, if we recognize and or understand that some of the things that I just stated, that the state actually keeps most of the money, then you're not benefiting the child in that regard. You're just hurting the man. But now we want to take a look at some other things. One, these states criminally penalize fathers if they can't make the payments for whatever reasons. Two, it is known within the states that people have fell into financial ruin because of child support. Three, homelessness because of child support. Four, license being suspended because of child support. Five, passports being taken away because of child support. Six, fathers being incarcerated because of child support. And yet another thing, automatically going into debt, depending on how far behind the state chooses to go as it relates to retroactivity, then this man could be paying 2 or 3 years of back child support that could amount to $20,000 or $30,000. So now he has just literally overnight, he has a $20,000 or $30,000 debt. Which mafsada is greater? Which mafsada is greater? It's clear that the mafsada that is greater is what's being placed on that father. And one of the things that even some of the kuffar are starting to say, that forget all that stupid talk that the states do as it relates to saying dead be dad, dead be dad, dead be dad. No, fathers, if you can't take care of yourself, there's no way you're going to be able to take care of a child. If you can't even take care of your own basic needs, there's no way you're going to be able to take care of somebody else. There's no way. All right. And another another thing that I forgot to mention is that even when they calculate the child support, they don't go off of your net income and analyze the responsibilities that you're paying monthly when they come up with their percentage. No, they go off your gross income, knowing that that's not what you see, and calculate it from your gross income and have no regard for what the other responsibilities that you have to take care of monthly. So they have no regard for your rent and no regard for your utilities and whatever else you have to pay. And even if you have another child whose mother didn't file a child support case against you, they give no consideration to any of that stuff when they make their judgment on the amount that a person has to pay. So this is done because quite naturally, the amount that they're saying may not even be what that person is capable of paying per month. So this is dhulm, and this is a greater mafsada, and there is no doubt as it relates to that. There's no doubt as it relates to that. And then aslan, this isn't a judgment that's in accordance with the text of the Kitab and the Sunnah. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala does not legislate something of this nature. So how could it be okay to go to this place? How could it be okay to go to this place? There is when we go to the Council on Temporary Families, there's an article or a study that they did on that they submitted to the University of Texas at Austin. And it was dealing with fathers that end up in jail, incarcerated over child support. So, and usually a person goes to jail for child support when they can't pay after a while because they're so caught up in debt. So one of the things the article says about 70%, 70, this is the overwhelming majority, of the 15 million open child support cases owe debt. They're not, and although they're not given the exact dynamic, why is that? Because of that retroactivity. As soon as a judgment is made, you got a lump sum of money that you owe, not to the child, but to the state. That money's going to the state and the federal government. And if you were a type that were paying, actually giving child support to your child, and that vindictive evil woman goes to the child support court and files on you anyway because you did something that she didn't like, then if you try to make the case that, look, I've been given, I don't need you guys' judgment, I don't need you guys' arbitration, I've already been sending money to my child, blah, 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 blah. They're going to say that wasn't child support, that those were gifts. And not credit that to what you have been doing all those years. And this is supposed to be the lesser of the two evils, or the lesser of the two disadvantages. So skipping down, this brief describes a study of who goes to jail for non-payment of child support, focusing on the factors that make it more likely for someone to be sent to jail for child support debt. Data coming from 4 waves of the Fragile Families and Child Well-Being Study, and that's FFCW for short. A sample of nearly 5,000 families when focal children were ages 1, 3, 5, and 9 years old. So now let's take a look at their findings. 53% of children in the FFCW sample had a non-resident father by the time they were 9 years old. Most non-custodial parents in the FFCW sample were male, which is typical. The number of non-custodial mothers in the FFCW sample was too small for analyzation. So that's one point. Second point, 52% of non-resident fathers had a formal child support order. Next point, 60% of fathers with child support orders had child support debt. 60%. And again, that's because when a judgment was made against them, most likely it was the retroactivity that caused them to go into debt. And then after that, 14% of fathers with child support debt, which is 1 in 7, were jailed for that debt. And I looked it up, the national average of when a father goes to jail for child support, on average, he spends 180 days in jail. That's 6 months. Off the bat, he spends 6 months in jail. How is that in the best interest of the child? How is that in the best interest of the child? How is that not dhulm? How is that not a mafsada? Incarcerated fathers for child support, in a study that was done in 2003, incarcerated fathers for child support, the number was between 250 to 400,000 fathers. 250 to 400,000 fathers, according to Missouri Legislative Report. And this is from the National Fathers Resource Center. And they even have what you call an obligor's prison or a debtor's prison where they go to. And that's usually due to failure to pay back support. In other words, retroactivity. Because when a judgment is made against a person, when they have to pay monthly, they're usually having to pay 2. Whatever the current child support order or the judgment is, plus they have to pay retroactivity. And that sends men in debt real quick. I think it's from what I was reading, once you are behind $10,000 and you miss a payment or 2, then there's a bench warrant issue for your arrest. And I'm pretty sure, as we know, each state is different. The point is, this is nowhere near from justice, and this is nowhere near from the hukm of Allah. This is nowhere near the hukm of Allah. And for sisters that do this, especially acting vindictive, especially when there's alternatives, because most brothers that I know that are striving to try to be upon the Kitab and the Sunnah, it's not impossible to get them to comply with certain things, especially if the only reason why they're doing what they're doing is reactionary. It's reactionary. And so for any woman to go to this court system, knowing that this is not a judgment that is in accordance with the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, and it consequently sends the person into financial ruin, homelessness, and other than that, incarceration. A person could have never had a jail record and end up with a jail record on account of this type of stuff, which makes it even harder for him to maintain himself. And if he can't maintain himself, he's not going to be able to maintain someone besides himself. So I say there's some ayat that I think are real important that need to be reflected off of. From these ayat, there's a statement of Allah, أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ? Is it the ruling of Jahiliyyah that they desire? وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حُكْمًا لِقَوْمٍ يُوقِنُونَ? And who is more better than Allah in judgment for a people that have certainty? And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, Alam tara ila alladhina yaz'umuna annahum amanu bima unzila ilayka وما أنزل من قبلك يريدون أن يتحاكموا إلى الطاغوت وقد أمروا أن يكفروا به. Have you not seen those that claim that they believe in that which has been revealed to you, and that which has been revealed that which has been revealed prior to you? They desire or they want to seek judgment in the taghut, and undoubtedly they have been commanded to disbelieve in that. وَيُرِيدُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَنْ يُضِلَّهُمْ ضَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. And the shaitan desires to cause them to go far astray. Now I remember this is a real situation, because it's clear that this judgment is not in accordance with the Kitab and the Sunnah. It's not from fairness. It's not from justice. It is literally from oppression. I know a real situation of a brother back in LA that took his ex-wife to Sheikh Farid Abdullah, and they were disputing over these issues. And she was threatening to take her ex-husband to court for child support and this and to gain custody of the children, and thus forth and so on. And Sheikh Farid, from what this brother informed me, that he made it explicitly clear that if she went to this court, she would not be seeking a judgment that is in accordance with the legislation of Allah. And that all she had to do is be upon taqwa, because he was making clear to her what the judgment of Allah was or is, and the ex-husband was there stating that he would comply to the judgment of Allah. So he was making it clear to this sister to seek a judgment from other than what Allah revealed is disbelief. And that she should not go that route. This brother said, Sheikh Farid, because I wasn't in that meeting, but he said Sheikh Farid made it explicitly clear to her. She went and took this man to court anyway, after hearing all that from Sheikh Farid. And anybody that's been around Sheikh Farid Abdullah knows how eloquent he is when it comes to the text of the Kitab and the Sunnah, and how things are, the text and the Sus with Sheikh Farid are on recall real easy. He recalls these things. This is a gift from Allah Ta'ala bestowed upon him. He recalls the text of the Kitab and the Sunnah real clearly. So she went to the courts anyway. And wallahi, this was years ago. Wallahi, where's she at today? What is she upon today? She's an apostate, and has been an apostate for 10 years, or a little bit longer than 10 years. And so some of these sisters, these wicked, vindictive women, Allah knows best concerning their Islam. I'm not making takfir on people, but the reality is this woman's kufr came out. She had no regard for what was stated, went there anyway. And years later, 1 year, 2 year passes, and now who she was revealed. And this shows why she didn't have concern for what Sheikh Farid was talking about. Why her heart didn't tremble when she was hearing the statement that to do this would be, this is considered to be disbelief. It wasn't that he was saying she was a disbeliever. He was saying this action is disbelief. She had no fear of that. And years later, you look up and she's an apostate on whatever it is that she's on now. How can a believer in Allah on the last day even go to these people for any type of judgment? Especially when you know that the judgment has nothing to do with the text of the Kitab and the Sunnah. It's only a cash cow for them. They're only benefiting themselves. And on top of that, you bring about unnecessary harm on a believer. And then when you hear statements like I'm about to say now, it doesn't cause your heart to tremble. The statement of the Prophet ﷺ, وَاتَّقُوا الظُّلْمَ فَإِنَّ الظُّلْمَ ظُلُمَاتٌ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And fear oppression, for indeed oppression is darkness on the day of resurrection. How can a person really say they believe in Allah on the last day and then know that the consequences of their action, that they're opening the doors for tremendous oppression to be placed on the father of their children who's a believer, and have no concern for that? And have no concern for that. And continue to run around talking about they believe in Allah on the last day? Allah Mustaan. So that's as it relates to child custody. But then we have, child support. But then we have child custody. And you know, I forgot to bring the books on child custody. And really, I have all night. So you guys can excuse me for a second while I get the books on child custody. I'll be right back. I apologize. I forgot to bring these books with me. I left them in my library. And just one of those things, right? So anyway, when we go on, we dealt with child support. So now when we take a look at child custody, when we take a look at child custody, then this is another matter, unfortunately, where the wicked from amongst the women are not judging by what Allah has revealed. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it forces fathers to have to go to the courts to only get a fraction of their rights. They don't even really get their full rights. They get a small fraction of their rights, and it's the only way that the sisters, these wicked sisters, it's the only way that forces them to give that father the fraction of the rights that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has given to him. And I grabbed the wrong book, right? And I'll go get the correct book in a second. But the bottom line is, and in fact, I translated it, so I don't think I need to get that book. But we're dealing with two issues here. Again, we have a issue or a situation where a man has a child with a woman. They separate. The woman gets remarried. So I have with me Bulugh al-Maram because these narrations are found within it. And so I'll just read to you the narration where you have the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, where he stated that a woman said, "O Messenger of Allah, my son, inna ibni hadha kana batni lahu wi'a'an wa thadyi lahu siqa'an wa hijri lahu hiwa'an wa inna abahu طلقني وأراد أن ينزعه مني فقال لها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنت أحق به ما لم تنكحي." And so it states, "O Messenger of Allah, this son of mine, or my son, my womb is a receptacle for him. My breasts are a water skin for him, and my lap is a protection for him. Unfortunately, his father divorced me and wants to take him from me." Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stated, "You have more right to him while you are not married." You have more right to him while you are not married. Now, this particular narration is used as proof to show that once a woman remarries, her right to that child now drops. And in fact, the majority of scholars hold that position, that once this happened, her rights as it relates to custody, it drops. Now, there is a minority from amongst the scholars that stated otherwise. And I'll just read Al-Amir as-Sun'ani's statement because, alhamdulillah, when I was looking up this, or when I was preparing this particular discussion tonight, I took the liberty of pre-translating and putting on Facebook the statement of Imam Al-Amir as-Sun'ani, rahimahullah. He states, "The narration indicates that the mother's right to custody drops when she remarries, and the majority of scholars held this opinion. Ibn Mundhir said that the people of knowledge all agreed with that. However, Al-Hasan and Ibn Hazm held the opinion that the right to custody does not drop on account of marriage." And now he states why. They cited as proof the fact that Anas ibn Malik was with his mother while she was remarried. Likewise, Salama married the Prophet ﷺ, and her child remained in her care. Additionally, the daughter of Hamza, the Prophet ﷺ judged, and this was after Hamza's death, the Prophet ﷺ judged that she be placed under the care of her maternal aunt while she was married. And that was as a result of certain people disputing over who should have custody of her. And if I'm not mistaken, Ali ibn Abi Talib was one of the ones that was putting forth his right to have custody of her. So Al-Amir As-San'ani, he eventually says, as for what is used as proof, surely it is not wholly evidence unless there is a request from whoever desires a transfer of custody along with his disputation as pertains to that. So now what he's saying is the proof that's being used that the woman's right drops after she gets remarried, he's saying that's not entirely the case. What he's saying is if disputation arises between the ex-husband and the woman after she gets, the ex-husband, I believe I said ex-husband, and the woman after she gets remarried, meaning as soon as she gets remarried, if the ex-husband wants custody of his child, this is a disputation arising as it relates to the transfer of custody. This is what he's referring to. So he's stating it's only valid if that happens. But he says, as for the absence of demand for custody on the part of the father, there's no differing in the case that the remarried mother takes responsibility for her child, yani custody. So, if that wasn't understood, if a sister remarries and the father doesn't want custody, he doesn't raise a concern and wants custody, then the responsibility remains with the mother. But if she gets remarried and he wants custody of his child, then automatically her right drops based off the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. And this particular position that Al-Amir As-San'ani stated, it gives weight or it gives consideration to all those things that were mentioned. It's a balance between all of them. So, but that's a different discussion in itself as it relates to the difference of opinion on this matter. The point is, how many fathers have raised this dispute with the mothers of children after they've gotten remarried and have not gotten their right? Have not gotten their right. A woman then runs to the courts to get full custody of the children. There's never been a case of custody established for the child who has full, at least with the courts. And so a disputation arises, a woman runs to them for judgment in that regard, and consequently withholds this man's right that's been given to him by Allah, seeking a judgment of Jahiliyyah over the Sharia of Allah. So that's as it relates to that particular scenario. But then we have a scenario from another narration where, again, the child could reach the age of tamyiz, and the scholars look at that as being 7 years old. And the child, if in disputation, the child could choose which parent they want to go with, the mother or the father. How many of these wicked women do that? Allow the child to choose which way to go? Or do they withhold this prophetic practice? Do they obstruct this prophetic practice? Yani, in preference of their desires? Or do they do what's even worse than that by now running to these courts to get a judgment that will ensure that that man's right is prevented? أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ? Is it the judgments of ignorance that they desire? And so when looking at this particular issue, this brings about the need of having some type of, this legitimizes the need of having some type of family adjudication center for the Muslims. One in each state, one in Pennsylvania, one in New York, one in New Jersey. Why one in each state? Why? Because each state's laws are slightly different. So if you're a person that lives in New York, regardless if you're in upstate New York or around NYC and like this, then you shouldn't go to Pennsylvania. If we're able to establish, if Allah blesses us with success in establishing these things, you shouldn't go to Pennsylvania to handle it because the laws in Pennsylvania are different, slightly different. You should go to the one in New York. And when you go with that woman, inshallah, if Allah blesses us with tawfiq in establishing these things, then now the people are actually getting a judgment that's built and based upon the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, not judgments that are built and based upon Jahiliyyah. And to these types of women, they have to be reminded of these serious statements. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. In some states, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. In another verse, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. And whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, but whoever judges by other than what Allah has revealed, then they are disbelievers. In another verse, they are oppressors. In another verse, they are manifestly sinful and morally sinful. And when looking at this particular verse, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ, Ibn Abbas, he stated what's intended by this is kufr duna kufr. Kufr duna kufr, or kufr al-asghar. But we know kufr al-asghar is a wasila ila kufr al-akbar. That is a means to major disbelief. And so if a person goes seeking a judgment by other than what Allah revealed, thinking it to be better than Allah's judgment, then they slip into disbelief. Or considering it to be permissible to do this, then they slip into disbelief. Or holding it on equal to the judgment of Allah, then they slip into disbelief. And thus forth and so on. And so it's very dangerous to play with this type of stuff. It's very dangerous to be playing with this type of stuff. And so for people that want to stay in accordance with that which Allah loves and is pleased with, then we have to make strides to ensure that we're seeking judgments that Allah loves and is pleased with, and we're not going and running to this one or that one or this court or that court in order to get a judgment in accordance with our desires. And so, inshallah, because I believe I've almost been talking for, I thought I was been talking for 2 hours, but it looks like 1 hour and 20 minutes. Walillah alhamd. Inshallah, within the next couple of weeks, Talha Islamic Ministry is going to try to put something together. We'll have it on the website about a family adjudication center to deal with these types of issues. The documentation that'll be drawn up, like I mentioned in the beginning of this talk, will be documentation, inshallah, that will be court admissible. So it won't be this contract or this document is, and you have ayat and hadith and things of that nature, and then no, all that's going to be left out. But the things that are mentioned within the documentation are in accordance with the ayat and hadith. But the documentation has to be put together in a way that it is court admissible. It's court admissible just in case something arises and one of the two parties has a moment of where they have a lack of taqwa. And so now the courts are doing nothing more than enforcing the document that both parties signed. And the document, is stating basically in a nutshell, the hukm of Allah in this matter or that matter. So let's say, for instance, if a couple gets a divorce, they can go to the family adjudication center to work out what's going to take place as it relates to child support. So this is why I say we would need an accountant on deck, or somebody that is skilled in financial budgeting, because now they can actually take a look at what the man is earning. They could take a look at his check stubs. That brother can present his monthly expenses. He can present if he has a child from another marriage and what he's paying in that household or for that child. And now this this person who is skilled in budgeting can now give an actual accurate assessment of what he is able to pay, and it's laid out in front of him and in front of the ex-wife. And that is a judgment, because everybody's going to be different. You can't bring every person in court and tell them you're paying this amount or that amount, and going off of gross income instead of net income, and thus and not giving any consideration to his monthly expenses. This is dhulm. This is oppression. And thus for so on. Or in the situation of child custody, because fathers are going through these problems, and then they have to go to the courts to get just a fraction of their rights. They go to the courts just to even be able to see the child. Only a wicked woman. Listen, let me tell you, I have a brother. He's still a Crip to this day. Still a Crip. He's not on guidance. He doesn't claim to be Muslim. He outwardly states he's not Muslim. Although he's born Muslim, he doesn't affirm this for himself. He had a girlfriend that was a Latina. I remember he told me that this Latina, no guidance, a girlfriend, no guidance. She had a child by a Latino male. And in LA, the Latinos are either from Mexico, El Salvador, or Guatemala. Those are the majority. Well, you didn't really find Cubans, you didn't really find Puerto Ricans and like this. Those three areas is where you mainly, those are three areas where the Latinos were mainly coming from that were in LA. So anyway, he was dating some chick, and the father wasn't taking care of the children. He said, do you have him on child support? He asked her if she had him on child support. She reacted, no, I would never put him through that. She said she would never put him through that. Have him mixed up in that court system. This is a woman with no guidance, but she understood the child support court system, and she said she don't want that for him. You have these women that have guidance. They've been given a gift, and they act in contradiction to the gift that they've been given, and do things like this out of spite and vindictiveness. I already mentioned the story about the sister or ex-sister who Sheikh Farid Abdullah made it explicitly clear to do this or to seek a judgment that's of disbelief. This act would be disbelief, to seek this judgment of ignorance. This is what was supposed to happen Islamically. She went anyway. Years later, she's an apostate. May Allah guide her back to Islam. But some of these wicked sisters, not the righteous sisters, but these wicked sisters do things that'll cause you to scratch your head and actually wonder about their Islam. It doesn't matter what happened between you and the ex-husband while you were married. If children were produced from that, the sisters have to act in the best manner as it relates to the upbringing of those children. Because if you try and prevent the children from whatever angle you come with, or they can't go over there because of this, or they can't go over there because of that, and then try and yell, you don't. The only people that's being hurt by that are the children. You're not hurting the fathers. The fathers aren't being hurt by that. We're men. A lot of times we're not losing any sleep over that, crying at night. What do you think you're doing? You think we're stressing over that? We're men. We adapt to things. We adapt to things. That's what makes us men. Because we're emotionally able to deal with these issues. We don't fall into despair. We don't fall into grief. We don't fall into sorrow. While you're sitting in, and while these women are sitting there thinking that they're actually doing something. And the only ones that's hurting is the children. How many, I'm pretty sure the brothers understand from experiences in this society, this Catholic society, how many of the brothers have experienced where women upon no guidance were acting vindictively like this with the fathers of their children, and then when those children got of age and went to see their fathers, and their fathers explained their side of the story, how after they listened to their father, they totally cut their mothers off. Once they heard their father's side of the story, that he wanted to be around, that he loved them, and thus forth for so on, and that she was being an obstacle. She was acting ignorantly. She was acting stupidly. That was the means that caused about a ruin in the relationship between her and them after they had reached adulthood. So if you're a sister listening to this and you're acting like this, the reality is you're not hurting anyone but the children, and then eventually it's going to come back to bite you. It's going to come back to bite you. It's going to come back to bite you in more ways than one. Because first and foremost, who you should be thinking about, you shouldn't be thinking about if your children grow up and don't want to have nothing to do with you. Who you should be thinking about is Allah. And what your standing is with Allah by acting like this. Then secondly, thereafter, you should be thinking about how it's going to affect your children. And this society that we living in with all this kufr and thus forth and so on, all these filthy ideas that's floating around in society, the children need both parents to be a part of their lives. Fathers keep their daughters off of the stripper pole. Fathers keep their sons out of gangs. So, again, it's like I said, we're gonna be on the lookout in a couple of weeks. We just need to write and put together the idea for this family adjudication center, and we hope to have the support of the believers if you believe that this would be beneficial. And I'm even going to say it like this: look, if it's because I've come up with the idea of doing it, that you say, you know what, I'm not going to support that. That's Al Anjelesi. I don't want to support anything Al Anjelesi is doing. Okay, no problem. Go to your favorite da'i. Once it's up on the website, you go to your favorite da'i and take exactly what was written on the website to your favorite da'i and have him organize it. And have him do it. It really doesn't matter who does it. It just needs to be done. It just needs to be done. So how your favorite da'i do it? Convince him to do it then. But at this point, we have to start getting things accomplished. We have to start institution building. And the way that we're going right now, Allahumma musta'an, asallallahu al-afiyah wa salama. So with that, I'm not going to prolong this anymore. With that, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. I hope that the people, the brothers and the sisters that listen, find the value in what was said, and when everything is put together, assist. But again, it's like I said, if you don't want to assist it because I'm involved in it, then go to your favorite da'i and take the idea to him. That's the only other thing I could say. That's the only other thing I could say. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. Jazakumullahu khairah. I apologize if I was long-winded. I apologize if I said anything that may have been offensive to anyone, specifically the sisters. But I do encourage the sisters to the wicked ones. Well, first off, I encourage the righteous sisters to be sisters to these wicked sisters, to improve the sisterhood by giving them advice, by telling them don't fall into that, by telling them there's a bigger picture here, telling them that we've run away from this type of activity, this type of behavior when we accepted Islam. This is going to be better for the children and better for the society, the cooperation, not this other stuff, and a lot of these sisters will swear up and down, I ran to this one, I ran to that one for help, nobody would listen. No, going to who you think the father knows, going to them and trying to shame the father or trying to ruin the reputation of the father is not trying to help the situation. Going here and there, calling this one and calling that one, he does this, he does that, he's this, he's that. No, what's the objective of why you're calling? Are you calling to badmouth the person, or are you calling to bring about a resolution to something? How many from amongst the brothers involved in dawah get phone calls from women like this? Not trying to rectify anything, just trying to make a person look bad. And then when they ask questions, stumbling over words. And then if they actually get in contact with that man, they find out that the scenario is a whole lot different than what that person is painted. We should be tired of this type of stuff. We should be past this type of ignorance. If you're a woman that's in her 30s, you should be past this type of ignorance. You shouldn't be, like something that my father said, there is no fool like an old fool. Because you've gone through you've experienced life, you should get to a certain degree from your life experiences, a certain amount of wisdom. But you still react, first and foremost, you have guidance from Allah. You're going to react like a 23-year-old ignorant woman stooped upon kufr? Allahumma musta'an. And with that, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feekum.